Hello, YouTube. Figured I'd make a little bit of a different kind of video for y'all today. I just kind of want to talk about everything that's been on my mind as of late, but mainly I'm going to talk about the state of healing in Kata. I'm also going to talk about what I believe the future is going to look like for this game. I'm going to talk about logs a little bit. I'm going to talk about the healers that I play. And I'm going to shit talk retail super hard at the end because I love to shit talk retail WoW. So to start off, I'll say that Kata has been absolutely amazing. I literally have not had this much fun playing WoW since original Wrath Lich King, which for me was the peak of my WoW addiction. It was the first time where I was able to play WoW a lot. I had my own computer. I had the summer holidays off from school, and it was just so nice to wake up every morning and play WoW for 16 hours a day like an absolute no-life loser. I was addicted. I was so thoroughly addicted back then, you have no idea. But I haven't felt that addiction really to the game until, well, right now. So I'm really happy to once again dedicate my life to this dead boomer game. With that said, I've got a bit of a hot take here for you. It's real spicy. And a lot of you might disagree, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think that this moment in time right here is the peak of World of Warcraft for healers. This specific raid tier is the peak. It never gets any better than this in any expansion. And the reason I believe this is because this raid tier has a lot of bosses, which is great. The bosses are really well designed for healers. They do a lot of damage, and gear is weak, so healers are actually rewarded for managing their mana well and playing intelligently. Also, the health bars go up and down really slowly, so healing is not just a sniping fiesta like it was in Wrath. So everything really is as it should be, which means it's all downhill from here, folks. Now, some people are excited for Firelands. They think Firelands is really good. But for healers, I'm not sure if it's going to be good because it's only 7 bosses and not many of them are fun to heal. Balrog is cancer. Shanox does no damage. Major Homo does no damage because you can just cheese him by keeping him in cat form. Ragnaros does no damage. In fact, I don't know if you guys know this, but the world first kill of 25 heroic Ragnaros was 3 healed. Imagine that. 3 healers in 25 men. World first. How ridiculous. But that's what happened. So the only bosses that are going to be fun to heal in my mind are Bethtalak, the spider boss, Rylith, the boss that everyone hates, and Alice Razor. Except Alice Razor won't be that fun because Holy Pallies are going to absolutely demolish everyone on that boss, and I hate getting demolished by Holy Paladins. Let me fill you guys in on a little secret, okay? Everyone who plays Holy Paladin is fucking trash. That's why they play it. Because they can't play a real healer. And this is true in every expansion. There is not a single expansion where Holy Pally takes skill to play. So while I'm sitting here sweating my ass off trying to do big heals, these stupid idiots are just rolling their face on the keyboard and doing more healing than me. It's disgusting. Even worse is there are people out there who play Holy Pally in every expansion. I was watching this Holy Pally Sui guy, you've probably heard of him. And this guy has like 4 Holy Paladin ults. And his main is a Holy Paladin as well. Like, what the F? So I go on this guy's YouTube channel, and he's got videos going back to original Cataclysm, where he's still playing Holy Paladin. Like, this guy must have actual brain damage to be playing Holy Paladin for that long. Because there's no way that any normal, well-functioning human being would be able to convince himself that it's okay to play that much Holy Paladin. There's no way. Anyways, that was my daily Holy Paladin rant. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about some of the other healers in Kata. and I'm going to throw up my healer ratings chart that was in a YouTube video I made a couple months before Kata came out. So this was my prediction for how each healer was going to end up in Kata, and for the most part I feel like I was correct. One thing I will say is when I did the viability ratings, I didn't account for how difficult the healers would be to play and how that would impact the majority of guilds. So while I do believe that the optimal raid comp for Kata is double Holy Pally, 1 disc, 1 Sham, and 1 Wrestler Druid, your non-Holy Paladin and Holy Priest players might not perform very well in a raid, just because those healers are really hard to play properly. So if I were to count for that, I would probably have knocked down Disc Priest, Wrestler Druid, and Wrestler Shaman by 1 point. On top of that, I think I overestimated how difficult Wrestler Druids would be to play, because I thought that tree form would be harder to use. I thought that Tranquility would snapshot with tree form so that you'd have to use your Tranquility at the end of your tree form, but that doesn't seem to be the case, so I'm sorry for misleading you guys on that. With that said, tree form is still very difficult to use, and I highly doubt that many people in the world are using it properly, but rather than trying to use Tranquility at the end of your tree form, you'll just want to split up your Tranquility and your tree and use them at different times. Alternatively, you can use Tranquility during your tree form, but it's difficult to do that properly because you want to make sure that Wild Growth and Swiftmend are on cooldown for as long as possible while you're channeling Tranquility. And ideally, you want to maintain Life Plume on the tank during your Tranquility channel, and you don't want to lose your Mastery buff while you're channeling Tranquility. So, it's tricky. It's very tricky. You're honestly probably better off just separating your Trank and your tree form. Anyways, let's move past Wrestler Druid and talk about Disc Priest, which I also main. So unlike with Wrestler Druid, I think I underestimated the difficulty of Disc Priest a little bit, because I'm definitely having a lot more trouble min-maxing my Disc Priest than I did with my Wrestler Druid. And I've noticed in the logs that most Disc Priest players are trying to take the easy way out, and they're just spamming Atonement for the whole fight. Except here's the thing. That is not at all how you play Disc Priest in Kata. Everyone who spams Atonement is a shit noob, straight up. This is not MoP. You don't just spam Atonement mindlessly, because the healing per mana of Smite is not good. Even if you have the Holy Fire dot up and 5 stacks of Evangelism, the healing per mana, and the HBS for that matter, is still just mediocre. So you definitely shouldn't be doing that, except for on Helphus. And you know, it's kind of funny. People always try to play healers in the exact opposite way that you're supposed to. And Priest in Kata is the perfect example of this. This Priest is a genuinely complicated healer to play. You have to be absolutely woke as fuck to be able to play it properly, especially in 10-man. But whenever people are presented with a genuinely complex healer, like Disc Priest in Kata, or Wrestler Druid in TBC, which I also played, people always try to play it in the most brain-dead way. So in TBC, for example, pretty much every Wrestler Druid would either spam 1 stack Life Boom on the raid, which was literally the worst thing you could do, or they would only heal the tanks and nobody else, and they would just wipe over and over because they weren't spending any of their mana healing the raid. They would just end every boss with like 80% of their mana. And both of those ways of playing Wrestler Druid were absolutely horrible, but that is what people did. Now on the flip side, you'll have a healer that is genuinely brain dead, like Holy Priest and Kata, where all you have to do is press 3 or 4 buttons over and over. But when people are presented with a brain dead healer, they always try to play it in the most woke as fuck way. There are a lot of Holy Priests out there speccing into Evangelism, swapping chakras, trying to use all their abilities, and there's literally no reason to do any of that, except for on like 1 or 2 raid bosses. You're actually much more likely to lose healing by doing that shit. But that's what people do. It's kind of weird. Moving past that, there is one thing that has really surprised me since Kata has come out. And that is that most guilds are running Disc Priest Holy Paladin in 10-man. Yet for the life of me, I cannot figure out why Holy Pally should be used instead of Wrestler Druid. When it comes to just raw healing, Wrestler Druids absolutely shit on Holy Pally's dick in 10-man. Like, if I ever did less healing than a Holy Pally in 10-man playing Rusty Druid, I would actually uninstall. Unless it's literally a boss where, like, the whole raid is just stacked up for the whole fight. A Rusty Druid should just never do less healing than a Holy Pally in 10-man. There's no way. Now, obviously, Holy Pallies bring Hand of Sack, which is nice to have, but I'm not sure if you'll even need it, because you'll have a Disc Priest, which has pain suppression, and Blood Decays are already unkillable enough as it is, so I don't know. If anyone can tell me why Disc Priest Holy Pally is considered the standard raid comp instead of Disc Wrestler Druid, I would love to know, because I can't figure it out. One theory that I have is that private server players probably farmed Dragon Soul over and over for years, and Dragon Soul is a raid with a lot of stacked up raid healing, which would benefit Holy Pally because of Holy Radiance. So I think that's the reason people believe that Holy Pally Disc is the best comp for 10-man. They're just copying the private server meta. But since we're not in Dragon Soul, I don't think Holy Pally Disc should be the meta. But whatever. It is what it is. Now let's move on and talk about logs. Parsing. So raid logging as a healer in Cata is actually really fun. In my opinion, Cata is the holy grail of healing parses. If you can parse well on most bosses in Cata, then you are genuinely a good healer. Holy Pally logs are the exception though, because Holy Pally logs are entirely predetermined by how many people stack up for Holy Radiance, which is actually hilarious. It's kind of like your punishment for playing Holy Pally. You get to have fun being OP and brain dead, but at the same time, your logs are super fried, which is so funny. Get fucked, Holy Pally players. Now I'm going to educate you guys on healing logs right now, because these are probably the most misunderstood things of all time, especially on forums and Reddit and class discords. Nobody even tries to honestly evaluate the legitimacy of healing logs, so I'm going to do it now. And I have made a video about healing parses before, back in TBC, so you can watch that if you want. But fair warning before we get into this part of the video. If you thought my last takes were hot, these takes are going to be hotter than Miley Cyrus swinging around on that wrecking ball. And if you didn't think Miley looked hot in that music video, you have to understand one thing. It's not her physical appearance that made her hot, okay? Because let's be real. Miley Cyrus might not be thicker than an Oda bowl meal, but it's the fact that she converted from goody two-shoes Hannah Montana into such a little whore in the blink of an eye. That's what made her hot. And that's exactly how hot these takes are going to be. So prepare yourself. Drink some water. So healing parses are typically thought of in a very black and white way. A lot of people, mainly terminally online people, tend to think that healing parses either always matter or they never matter. Usually the latter. Also, DPS players absolutely love to jump on the bandwagon of healing parses never mattering. And there are two reasons for that. The first is that DPS players don't know that much about healing. And I know this is true because most people who have been playing healers for years don't know that much about healing. Secondly, DPS players want nothing more than to believe that their parses are the only ones that matter. And that seems to be what the majority of the community believes, because the majority of the community consists of, shocker, DPS players. In fact, so many players have spouted for years that healing parses don't matter, that they even managed to gaslight the healing community into believing that this is true. But is it true? Is it true that healing parses are inherently flawed and therefore never matter? No, it's not true. The reality is that it's not a black and white issue. In reality, the legitimacy of healing parses changes from expansion to expansion, which is also true for DPS parses, technically. And in order for healing parses to really matter, and by matter, I mean to be a representation of skill and proper gameplay. In order for that to be the case, a bunch of criteria needs to be met. The first is you need to have bosses that do a lot of damage, specifically unavoidable damage, so that healers always have a lot to heal. Next, the bosses need to live for a long time, so that healers have to manage their mana. Third, the classes need to be well designed and have a decent skill cap so that not everybody is playing in the exact same way, like in Wrath of Lich King. God, I fucking hate Wrath of Lich King. And lastly, there shouldn't be any bullshit that negatively affects healing parses, such as raid comp bullshit, like in TBC, Innervate, giving you an entire extra mana bar, like in every expansion before Cataclysm, and raid cooldowns also negatively affect healing parses. So based on that, you should be able to tell that the legitimacy of healing parses is going to change in every expansion, especially from vanilla to WoD, because the healing gameplay completely changes from expansion to expansion within that range. So with that said, my opinion on healing parses is that they are more legit than DPS parses in 2 expansions, TBC and Cataclysm. Mainly because those are the only 2 expansions where healing is designed well, which is a very depressing thing to think about, to be honest with you. But that's the way it is. In every other expansion, DPS parses are more legit because healing is just designed in a horrible way. But like I said before, Cataclysm specifically is the holy grail raid logging expansion for healers, especially this first raid tier, because the only flaws that exist are raid cooldowns existing, and you have a few bosses that aren't legit for parsing, such as Chimeron, Conclave of Wind, and Sinestra, kinda sorta, because of the dispels. Fortunately, raid cooldowns are a lot weaker in Cataclysm compared to every expansion that follows, where they end up ruining the game, in my opinion. So the raid cooldown issue doesn't really affect healing parses that much in Cata, from what I can tell. There is also one amazing aspect of healing parses that nobody ever wants to talk about, and this is true in every expansion that I've played, which is TBC to WoD. I don't know about after WoD, but every expansion that I've played, the absolute best thing about healing parses in comparison to DPS parses is that the amount of gear you have and the guild that you play in really doesn't matter that much. I have played in like 10 different guilds since TBC Classic came out, and these guilds have been in the range of turbo casual to decently sweaty, and I have parsed really well in every single guild, with every comp, with every class that I've played, and with varying levels of gear. Like, it really doesn't matter that much. Whereas with DPS parses, you know, and I know that you know that I know that you know, that the guild that you play in massively impacts how easy it is to parse, because when you have a higher concentration of sweaty DPS players in your guild, you kill bosses faster, which makes everyone parse higher, and everyone in these kinds of guilds has more gear than 99% of the guilds in the world, because the raid is literally on farm from week 1, which makes it even easier to parse. And you're also more inclined to do sweaty parse focus strategies when you're in these kind of guilds. So every raid tier and every expansion is literally the exact same shit. Those high-end DPS parses are not competitive at all, because unless you're in a top guild, you basically have no chance. Healing parses are the exact opposite of that. You can get those really high parses regardless of what guild you're in, more or less. And gear also doesn't really matter as much, so the competition is much higher. And you might be wondering why gear doesn't matter as much for healing as it does for DPS. And the answer is, it's complicated. I'm not really sure why gear doesn't matter that much for healing, but I'm pretty sure a big part of it is that healing is a more misunderstood role than DPS. It seems to me like most players tend to understand what you need to do in order to do good DPS, even if they're not very good at executing it in a raid. Things like maximizing uptime, minimizing movement, maximizing AoE and cleave, lining up your cooldowns with trinket procs, lust, potion, and doing your rotation properly. It seems like people, on average, kind of understand these things. But when it comes to healing, it feels like not many people understand how to min-max healers, or even understand why it's important to min-max as a healer. Also, a lot of healers have really shitty raid frames, but here's the thing. I've been making guides for healers since the Burning Shit'Sade. And back then, when I would talk about things like precasting, how to avoid overhealing, working together with your co-healers, proper mana management, going at the right time. When I talked about these things, people would literally respond to me like I discovered fire. It's like they had no idea about any of this, even though the game had literally been out for 15 years. And I've certainly noticed it myself, because like I said before, I've been in so many different guilds. I've healed alongside at least 50 different healers since TBC Classic came out, and I can count on one hand how many of those healers that I played with are actually good at healing. Why exactly that is, I don't know. I think one reason is because the community itself, especially on forums and class discords, does a huge disservice to healers by constantly shitting on them for talking about logs and saying all this cope shit. Like, as long as the boss died, you did a good job, or as long as nobody died, you did a good job, or as long as you're not parsing in the gray, you did a good job. Like, what the fuck? You have no idea how many times I've seen people say shit like this, and it is literally so retarded. Like, what is even the logic? I got carried, so therefore I did nothing wrong? Like, what? What? I never see DPS players say shit like this. DPS players are always trying to push their DPS higher and higher, regardless of if the boss died or not. But for some reason, healers are always coping so fucking hard. So many healers genuinely believe that the amount of healing they do doesn't matter. They've actually managed to convince themselves that even though they're healing the boss entirely wrong and doing everything horribly, that it doesn't matter. And that is insane, because as a healer, you have such a massive amount of impact on your raid's ability to kill a boss. If you heal a boss really well, you can single-handedly carry your raid to victory, whereas DPSers can do no such thing. The amount of impact you have on your raid as an individual DPSer is hardly anything. Like, if you were to swap out a really good DPSer for an average level DPSer in your raid, you would hardly even notice a difference. The boss and the Yaz would die a smidge faster, that's about it. But swapping out a really good healer for an average level healer makes a world of difference. It can literally mean the difference between a wipe and a kill. For example, in TBC I joined this dad guild that was 6 healing bosses and doing grandpa strats for everything, because their healers were so fucking bad, and they couldn't heal through any unnecessary damage. But literally within 2 weeks of me joining the guild, we were able to not only drop a healer, but also do normal strategies. And the guild progressed through bosses much faster after I joined. That is literally the difference that one good healer makes on a raid group. Yet for some strange reason, the community keeps perpetuating this narrative that the amount of healing you do doesn't matter. And I don't know why. My guess is that this narrative trickled down from retail, because on retail, Blizzard has systematically destroyed healing throughout the years. They have bastardized it to such an extent where maximizing your healing really doesn't matter anymore. The game is literally just ramping and raid cooldown simulator. All you do is you wait until the list tells you that it's your turn to play the game. And outside of those specific moments, what you do really doesn't matter that much. But healing isn't like that in the classic WoW expansions. So by perpetuating this narrative that your logs don't matter or your healing doesn't matter, all you're doing is gatekeeping the living shit out of players and causing them to be bad at the game. Oof. Alright, those were some spicy hot takes. Let's take a sip of water and switch topics here. That was a lot. Okay, let's talk about the future. So like I said before, Fireland is going to be pretty mid, I think. DPSers will probably have more fun than healers will, if I were to guess. And Dragon Soul is actually decently fun to heal, despite the raid being really bland looking and the last 2 bosses being a total letdown. Although a more pressing issue is that I think Kata is going to lose a lot of players to SOD and the War Within, since everyone tends to go where the hype is, like the sheep that they are. However, I will say that I don't think the War Within is going to hold its player base for very long. I think that people are going to realize very quickly that the War Within is a literal copy pasta of Dragonflight, and they're going to quit. Because, I've been watching some retail streams, like Venruki, for example. I've been watching Venruki stream the beta, and to be honest with you, if he didn't write the War Within in the title of his stream, I wouldn't be able to tell you if he was playing the War Within or Dragonflight. That shit looks exactly the same. Yet for some reason, Venruki is just hyping the shit out of this expansion. He's like, oh my god, the War Within is going to be sick, you guys, I can't wait. And it's like, bitch, what the fuck are you... It's like, bitch, what the fuck are you talking about? This is literally the exact same shit. How can you possibly think it's going to be sick? You know, to be honest with you, I think he's just pretending to get more viewers, but whatever. And you know, the retail YouTubers who are reviewing The War Within aren't really any better. Like, I've been watching them talk about healing and whatnot in The War Within, and the amount of faith these people have in Blizzard is crazy to me. Like, they genuinely believe that if they give good, solid feedback, that Blizzard will actually do something. They believe that The War Within is going to be different from fucking Dragon Cope and Shithole Lands and whatever other awful expansion that's come out in the past 8 years, but here's the thing. Blizzard doesn't really listen to feedback on retail. Or they listen to it and they don't give a shit. I don't know what it is, I don't know why it is, and I'm not one to speculate. But I remember when the WoD Alpha came out, and Blizzard completely gutted the gameplay, pruned everything. I even remember watching Bajira's video during the WoD Alpha. Here, take a look.
Oh no. Alright, well. We got Charge, Mortal Strike, and Colossus Smash. And Hamstring. Okay. Here we go! Nice! Whirlwind. 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 Mortal Strike. Whirlwind. Nice.
The gameplay was really that bad for a lot of classes and specs. Not all of them, but most of them it was. And people gave their feedback on the forums. A lot of people did. A lot of really good players who would normally never visit the cesspool of retardation, that is the WoW forums, actually went on there this one time to give their feedback. And you know what happened? Blizzard ignored all of it. And the gameplay that we got when the game went live was pretty close to what you saw in that Bajira video. And then Legion came along, and Blizzard revamped the classes, and the gameplay was still trash. And people gave their feedback again, hoping so desperately that Blizzard would listen and revert the gameplay back to the way it was in Cata or MoP, where people were happy with the way the class played. But they didn't do it. They once again ignored everyone and actually doubled down on what made Warlords of Draenor bad, especially for healers. Every expansion after WoD, the game became more and more of a ramping and raid cooldown simulator. And that's not the only problem. Mana management got completely stripped away throughout the years. Smart healing became more and more prevalent. Healers being forced to do damage became more and more prevalent. And all these things are absolutely horrible for the game. And people gave their feedback to try and prevent Blizzard from doing these changes, but it didn't matter. To be honest with you, I honestly believe back in 2017 that Blizzard was trying to destroy the game. I literally sat there and watched Blizzard systematically destroy everything that I once loved about the game, despite people constantly giving feedback that these changes they were making were bad. Yet for some strange reason, here we are, in the future, it's 2024, and there are people, apparently a lot of people, who genuinely believe that this time is going to be different. They believe that if they give Blizzard good, solid feedback, that they will actually make the gameplay good, like it was so long ago, back in Cata and MoP. But it's never going to happen. Blizzard has proven that they will never make retail good, but people keep getting fooled every expansion. You know that saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Motherfucker, you guys have been fooled like 6 times, and you're still paying for every new expansion that comes out. You're as bad as fucking Marvel fans. Hell, if you started playing the game in WoD or Legion, you don't even know that you're being fooled. You just genuinely believe that the game is supposed to be like that, not even realizing that the gameplay was literally so much better in Cata and MoP, but Blizzard ruined it. They took something that was so good that pretty much everyone liked, and they completely destroyed it. But people still, somehow, have hope that things are going to be different, and I just don't get it. So anyways, that's my prediction for retail. I think it's going to die super fast. Super fast, bro. Dead ass, no cap on God. Players are going to yeet that shit. Yeet. Skirt. Yeah. And as for SOD Phase 4, I honestly have no idea. Because technically, Blizzard can do whatever they want with SOD. So, it could be good, it could be bad. But I suppose the safest bet is to say that Phase 4 will be very casual, just like the other SOD phases, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's probably a good idea to cater SOD directly to casuals, because if you think about it, casual players have not been able to truly enjoy the game since original Wrath of the Lich King. I suppose that Legion was kind of okay for casuals. Everyone loves their world quests. Love my legendaries. I thought that shit was trash. But the point is, Cataclysm was the expansion that totally fucked casuals in the ass. That's why there was a mass exodus of players during that time. And I think that somewhere along the line, Blizzard must have realized that they can't create a game that appeals to everyone. So instead, for better or for worse, they have decided to split the game up into different parts and have each part cater to a different type of player. So SOD, for example, appeals to casuals, Retail appeals to Zoomers and top-end raiders, and Kata appeals to sweaty raid loggers and semi-hardcore raiders. That makes sense to me. And if that's the direction Blizzard wants to go down, then I'm all for it. So if SOD is, in fact, a filthy casual game going forward, Kata might not be totally dead in 4 months' time. We will just have to see. Anyways, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed my rambling. I just, I had a lot to get off my chest, Yeah. Anyways, that's it for me. Bye-bye.